Welcome to another episode of Management Unplugged by GR. Have you ever felt that overwhelming deluge of information, especially when you're trying to grasp complex business strategies?
Oh, definitely. It's a lot to keep up with.
We absolutely get it. That's precisely why we created the deep dive, to cut through the noise, extract the most important insights from, well, a whole stack of sources, and give you that crucial shortcut to being truly well-informed.
A much-needed shortcut sometimes.
Today, we're going to unpack something absolutely fundamental to modern business success: strategic alliances. In today's hyper-competitive world, it's increasingly rare for any single company to innovate fast enough, cover every critical market, or possess every necessary capability entirely on its own.
Right. The landscape's just too complex now.
So forming effective partnerships is no longer just a competitive advantage. It's very often a core necessity for survival and growth. But the big question, the one we're really diving into today, is how do you truly make these complex alliances work, not just on paper, but, in the unpredictable reality of business?
That's an excellent point. It's almost deceptively simple to say form an alliance, isn't it? Yet while countless companies attempt partnerships, far fewer truly master them.
Mm-hmm.
What's fascinating here is that we're going to explore how one leading pharmaceutical company, Eli Lilly and Company, didn't just dabble in alliances, but systematically built an exceptional industry-leading capability in this area.
Eli Lilly.
Their remarkable journey offers incredibly practical and actionable lessons for any professional looking to leverage external partnerships for innovation, market expansion, and, well, sustained growth.
Our mission today, then, is to explore Lilly's strategic approach to alliances in intricate detail. We'll dive into the critical factors that drove their shift towards formalizing partnerships, the key frameworks and tools they developed, and the real-world examples that made their Office of Alliance Management, or OAM, a genuine benchmark in the industry.
That OAM became quite famous.
Right. By the end of this deep dive, you'll gain practical insights, not just into establishing dedicated alliance functions, but truly understanding the entire alliance lifecycle, and most importantly, how to create maximum enduring value from these absolutely crucial collaborations.
Sounds good. Where do we start?
So let's unpack the landscape first. The pharmaceutical industry, which was once lauded as a five-star industry back in the 1980s by renowned strategist Professor Michael Porter.
Right. High profit, strong position.
Exactly. But it underwent a dramatic and often brutal transformation beginning in the 1990s. This wasn't just about natural growth. It was driven by an intense, almost frantic period of consolidation.
Precisely. If we look at the numbers, it's pretty stark. Okay. By 2003, the 42 member firms of the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Association, the PMA, that existed in 1988, well, they'd consolidated down to just 16.
Wow, that's a huge drop.
It's a staggering reduction.
Mm-hmm.
And what was driving this dramatic change? It was primarily a relentless search for efficiencies in both research and marketing. The sheer cost of developing a single drug had soared. We're talking over US $800 million by the early 2000s.
$800 million. For one drug.
Yep. And the entire process typically took anywhere from 10 to 12 years from initial discovery all the way to finally reaching sales.
That's a long time and a lot of money.
An enormous investment. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this immense investment meant incredibly high risk, especially when you consider that patents typically offer only 20 years of protection from the date of filing.
Right, not from the date it hits the market.
Exactly. So given that lengthy development cycle, the effective market exclusivity period was significantly shorter than 20 years, often just maybe 7 to 10 years. It made the return on investment incredibly precarious for these massive R&D outlays.
It was a real race against the clock and the patent expiration date.
Absolutely.
And adding to that already heavy burden, over 80% of patented drugs on the market in 2000 were projected to lose their patent protection by 2007. Just imagine that kind of revenue risk.
That's the famous patent cliff.
Yes.
Billions in revenue potentially vanishing overnight.
Exactly. This phenomenon, the patent cliff, meant companies were facing the prospect of losing huge revenue streams as their blockbuster drugs became vulnerable to generic competition. Simultaneously, the rise of powerful health maintenance organizations, HMOs, and the burgeoning generic drug manufacturers put phenomenal pricing pressure on pharmaceutical firms.
Right. Payers pushing back, generics eating into market share.
They constantly pushed for lower drug prices, squeezing already tight profit margins. And despite ever-growing research and development, R&D investments across the industry, there was a notable absence of new blockbusters, those truly groundbreaking drugs with over $1 billion in annual sales.
Yeah, critics were saying, all this consolidation and spending isn't actually producing more innovation.
It was, as you said, a perfect storm of challenges, putting immense pressure on traditional business models.
So this really raises a critical question for any company operating in that kind of environment. How do you maintain growth? How do you sustain innovation? And how do you de-risk your pipeline when your traditional methods are becoming less effective?
What was the answer?
Well, the answer for many, including Lilly, increasingly turned to external partnerships. One key strategy was in-licensing late-stage products from outside firms.
In licensing. So buying rights to drugs already partly developed.
Exactly. Acquiring the rights to develop and market drugs that had already gone through significant discovery and clinical trials elsewhere. For example, a pharmaceutical giant like Pfizer had several of its top-selling blockbusters like Lipitor, Celebrex, and Zyrtec.
Big names.
Huge names.
Yeah.
All originally developed by external parties before they were licensed in. This significantly de-risked their pipeline and sped up market entry.
That makes sense.
Conversely, companies also engaged in out-licensing. This is where internally developed molecules, if they were deemed too expensive for in-household development, or maybe inconsistent with their core portfolio strategy.
So things they developed but didn't want to pursue fully themselves.
Right. They could be licensed out to smaller research companies, often ones with lower cost structures. These arrangements often included cost-plus funding support to the partnering firms and typically carried options for buying back the molecule if subsequent data suggested, enhanced promise.
So keeping a foot in the door.
Precisely. It was a clever way to monetize internal research that might not fit their immediate core strategy, while still keeping an option open for the future if the market or their strategy shifted.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because this wasn't just about outsourcing a few tasks, was it? It sounds like a fundamental shift in how pharmaceutical companies viewed their entire operational structure.
It really was.
A scientist at Lilly articulated this profound change in thinking, saying, and I'm quoting directly here, "Theoretically, it is possible for each stage of the development of a molecule drug to be done by a different firm. The days are over when we used to think of pharmas as a vertically integrated business outfit. Now, efficiency and innovation dictates who does what and when. It literally expands the capability base here at Lilly and increases our capacity. It is a new emerging business model of virtual size for the pharmas."
Virtual size. That's a great phrase.
Isn't it? This wasn't just about cutting costs. It was about rethinking the entire value chain of drug development as a distributed network. It allowed Lilly to tap into highly specialized expertise and capacity without the heavy fixed costs, the associated risks, or the time constraints of trying to develop everything in-house.
Right. It became about creating a flexible, agile entity that could scale up or down by strategically leveraging partners, almost as if they were part of one larger virtual organization.
And this concept of a virtual size model was particularly influenced by the explosion of biotechnology in the 1990s, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Advances in molecular biology and genomics were opening up completely new avenues for drug discovery. But the critical technical capabilities largely resided outside the big, established pharmaceutical companies.
They were in these newer biotech firms.
Exactly. They were within these new, innovative biotech firms, often born out of university research. Biotech firms were typically small and agile, with their most coveted assets being their cutting-edge scientific personnel and proprietary technology, often protected by crucial patents.
But they lacked something the big guys had.
They often lacked the large-scale investment needed over a protracted period, coupled with the extremely high risk of product failure at any of the several stages of drug development. This is a huge barrier for these firms to advance on their own, all the way to commercialization.
I see.
Alliances with pharmaceutical giants, therefore, provided the perfect bridge, allowing biotechs to access the massive capital, the regulatory expertise, and the extensive infrastructure they so desperately lacked.
That makes perfect sense. These biotech firms had the groundbreaking science, but the pharma companies had the muscle, the resources to bring it to market. Think about this for a moment. It's estimated that a staggering 50% of a biotech's first decade funding could come directly from pharmaceutical companies.
Half their funding, that's huge.
It was part of what was known as the 10-50-40 formula for biotech funding. 10% from venture capital, 50% from pharma companies, and 40% from public equity markets. In return, pharma companies offered essential expertise that biotechs desperately needed. Things like navigating complex regulatory affairs, managing massive and intricate clinical trials.
Stuff biotechs just couldn't scale up for quickly.
Right, and accessing large-scale sales and marketing channels that biotech simply couldn't build overnight.
And the sheer size and complexity of these pharma biotech deals just skyrocketed, reflecting this growing reliance and opportunity. For instance, the largest deal back in 1993 was SmithKline Beecham's $125 million agreement with Human Genome Sciences, a significant amount at the time.
Okay, $125 million in 93.
But fast forward just 8 years to 2001, and the largest deal was a massive $1.3 billion collaboration between Bayer and Curagen.
Wow, a tenfold increase.
It clearly signals how central these alliances had become. By 2001, approximately 30% of drugs in clinical trials came directly from biotechs, which was a huge leap from only 7% just a decade earlier.
So almost a third of the pipeline.
Yeah. And while most alliances were non-equity based, it was pretty common for pharmaceutical companies to take a small equity position, sort of aligning incentives further. Lilly itself, for example, bought a minority stake in Isis Pharmaceuticals in 2001, licensing a molecule discovered at Isis for further development. I think it was for lung cancer.
Right.
Recognizing this growing influence and the need to stay on the cutting edge, Lilly also separately launched Lilly BioVentures in early 2000. This was a dedicated venture fund aimed specifically at investing in promising private biotech startup companies.
So they were really committing to this external innovation model.
Absolutely. It was a clear signal of their long-term commitment.
So it's clear that alliances became essential, but they're certainly not all the same, are they? Alliances aren't just one size fits all.
Not at all.
Research alliances, for instance, were typically classified by their development stage, and each stage had a vastly different risk and investment profile.
Right. You had early stage, middle stage, late stage.
Exactly. Early stage alliances focused on fundamental drug targets, things that might potentially evolve into a drug molecule years down the line. Then you had clinical or middle stage deals involving molecules that had already been developed to the point of the first human dose, moving into initial clinical trials.
A bit further along, less risk, maybe.
A bit less, yeah. And then advanced clinical or late stage deals, which were for molecules either already on the market or in phase 3 clinical trials nearing regulatory approval. Now, the risk profile shifts dramatically across these stages.
How dramatically?
Well, for example, only a tiny fraction, maybe 1 in 10,000, of early-stage targets might actually make it through the entire rigorous development process to become a marketable drug.
1 in 10,000. That's incredible risk.
Middle-stage deals, while still risky, had maybe about a 1 in 2 success rate to pass toxicology and efficacy requirements. Late-stage deals have much higher success rates, sometimes over 85%. But here's the kicker.
There's always a kicker.
The costs associated with them grow exponentially as molecules progress through the pipeline, often reaching tens or even hundreds of millions of dollars for phase 3 trials alone.
So lower risk, but vastly higher costs later on. You're balancing risk and reward across the entire pipeline.
Exactly. It's a portfolio game.
And it wasn't just about drug discovery and development either, although that was certainly a primary driver. Alliances extended to manufacturing, leveraging specialized firms for complex drug delivery systems and packaging.
Like insulin pens, maybe?
Exactly like that. This allowed pharmaceutical companies to focus on their core R&D while outsourcing specialized production needs, ensuring high quality and efficiency. And in the 1990s, marketing alliances became prominent, allowing companies to expand their reach into new territories or patient populations without building out massive new sales forces from scratch.
How did those work?
Well, they often took two distinct forms. Either co-branding, where competing firms marketed the same brand of a product, potentially pooling resources and market presence.
Okay, like a joint brand effort.
Or co-marketing, where competing pharmaceutical companies marketed the same product in agreed territories, but each under its own distinct brand name.
Different branding, same drug.
Right. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It means alliances are a truly multifaceted strategic tool, far beyond simple outsourcing. They're absolutely crucial for navigating complex and rapidly evolving markets by strategically leveraging external capabilities, sharing both risk as rewards, and ultimately expanding a company's overall capacity and reach.
It's fascinating how essential these partnerships became. And Lilly, as it turns out, had a much longer legacy of partnering than most might realize, stretching back surprisingly far.
Yeah, they weren't new to the game.
Not at all. The seeds of what was possibly one of the industry's first major collaborations were sown way back in late 1921. That's when George Close, Lilly's then director of research, read a paper about the groundbreaking benefits of insulin for patients with diabetes.
Insulin, a huge breakthrough.
Massive. This led to Lilly initiating conversations with the University of Toronto, which resulted in a pivotal agreement for Lilly to mass-produce high-quality insulin products and bring them to market.
So right back to the beginning almost.
Pretty much. And fast forward to the mid-1970s, Lilly's research team began working with Genentech, which was then a small, nascent biotechnology firm based in California.
Genentech, one of the pioneers.
Exactly. This agreement eventually became a breakthrough alliance and was, in fact, the very first between a pharmaceutical company and a biotech firm, leading to the 1982 launch of Humulin, the first genetically engineered product on the market.
Humulin, another landmark. So yeah, Lilly had deep roots in collaboration long before the 90s surge.
Definitely. But despite that long history, the wave of mergers and acquisitions, M&A, that was sweeping through the pharmaceutical industry during this intense period of consolidation was a powerful current. A lot of companies were merging.
Oh, absolutely. Mega mergers were happening left, right, and center. But Lilly's management, led by its insightful leadership, deliberately chose a strikingly different path.
They didn't go for the big mergers.
No. Their chairman and CEO, Sidney Torrell, famously stated, and I quote, "Our analyses to date have shown that sheer size achieved through merger or acquisition has not produced stronger growth. In fact, companies that have remained independent have outgrown firms that have chosen to consolidate."
Wow, that's a bold statement against the trend.
Incredibly bold and counterintuitive at the time. It challenged the prevailing wisdom that bigger was automatically better. It really raises an important question for any business leader. Is sheer size achieved through M&A always the most effective strategy?
Or is agility better?
Or is agility and strategically leveraging external capabilities through partnerships a more sustainable and ultimately effective growth strategy, especially in a dynamic and highly specialized industry? Lilly's leadership was clearly betting heavily on the latter.
And it seems like that bet paid off.
It certainly shaped their future direction.
What's striking is how that strategic choice then forced a different kind of internal reckoning. Traditionally, Lilly managed its alliances at a very operational level, and crucially, it was highly fragmented.
Meaning different departments handled their own deals.
Exactly. Think about it. Therapeutic areas like neuroscience or oncology would manage their own research alliances. Product or marketing departments would handle commercial alliances, and the procurement department was responsible for manufacturing collaborations. It was a patchwork, and coordination was largely ad hoc.
Sounds potentially chaotic, or at least inconsistent.
It could be. But a real turning point came in 1996 when Lilly lost a potential partnership to a competitor, a deal they had been courting for some time and truly believed they had in the bag.
Ouch. Losing a key deal can be a wake-up call.
It was. Post-deal interviews with the decision-makers on the other side triggered a serious introspective review of Lilly's entire alliance management processes. This internal scrutiny culminated in a casual but impactful discussion in one of the board meetings. One of the directors simply asked the question which really hit home.
What was the question?
If partnerships have been and will be increasingly important to Lilly's future, what is the management doing to improve Lilly's partnering capabilities?
Direct challenge from the board.
That was the wake-up call, the direct catalyst that truly pushed the initiative forward for formalizing alliance management.
And that single pointed question from the board led to an intensive 18-month review process. They brought in internal experts, external consultants from highly respected firms like Accenture and PricewaterhouseCoopers.
So a really thorough look.
Absolutely. The outcome of this extensive deep dive review was significant. In January 1999, Lilly formally established a dedicated organizational unit specifically for alliance management. They called it the Office of Alliance Management.
The OAM.
And they placed it under the capable leadership of Nelson Sims as its first executive director. This formalization marked a critical strategic pivot for the company, elevating alliance management from an ad hoc departmental function to a centralized strategic capability.
It wasn't just about having someone manage a deal anymore.
No, it was about building a core organizational competence.
And under Nelson Sims, its first executive director, the OAM swiftly introduced what they called the Lilly Alliance Management Process, or LMP.
LMP.
Sims described it simply as a roadmap used to streamline and simplify alliance management. This was a pivotal shift for Lilly, moving from what CEO Sidney Torrell aptly called a transaction-driven era of deal-making,
Just getting the contract signed.
to a relationship-driven era of partnership implementation. It vividly highlighted that the act of signing the contract was only the beginning. The real work and the real value lay in ensuring the ongoing health, productivity, and evolution of the collaboration.
Seeing the alliance as a living, breathing entity.
Precisely.
Initially, though, the OAM came in after a deal was done, right? Focusing on making sure processes were outlined once contracts were signed, and then managing the ongoing execution.
That was the first plan, yeah.
But they quickly learned that this handoff from business development to alliance management proved to be too abrupt.
What happened?
Well, Lilly's newly signed partners often had to reorient themselves to an entirely new group of individuals right after the deal closed. Imagine you've just finished intense negotiations you sign, and suddenly you're dealing with a whole new team.
Yeah, that sounds like it could create friction, confusion.
It did. Inefficiency, too. This was a critical learning moment.
Yeah.
So they quickly changed the process. An alliance manager would now visit potential partners during Lilly's due diligence phase, long before the ink was dry on any contract.
Getting involved much earlier.
Much earlier. This allowed the alliance manager to understand the partner's organization, their culture, their key people, their unique way of working from the very beginning. And after the deal was signed, the alliance manager would coordinate the critical first interactions with the new members of the combined team and help set the alliance's initial agenda and priorities.
So smoothing that transition.
Exactly. The OEM's core mission evolved to develop alignment, commitment, and capabilities to maximize alliance value, serving as an advocate for the collaboration itself, almost like an impartial ombudsman within Lilly, ensuring the partnership's best interests were kept in mind, not just Lilly's.
Interesting, like a neutral party inside the company.
Sort of. Their slogan perfectly captured this shift in focus and their unique value proposition. We don't make alliances, we make them better.
We make them better. I like
Right.
that. It clearly articulated their mission, execution, not just negotiation.
Right.
That shift from deal-making to making them better really zeroes in on where the greatest challenges often lie, doesn't it? Patty Martin, who served as an executive director of OAM, highlighted a critical insight that truly informed OAM's focus.
What was that insight?
She stated, and I quote, "More than 60% of the alliances fail due to non-technical reasons."
60%. Not because the science failed.
Not primarily. The reasons she listed were conflicts generated from partners' cultural differences, unaligned objectives of the partners, poor alliance leadership, and poor integration processes.
The soft stuff.
The human element. Exactly. This is where the OAM honed its efforts on those crucial soft factors that, surprisingly, often derail partnerships far more frequently than scientific setbacks or market issues.
So how do they tackle that, like cultural differences?
Yeah. Well, for example, they didn't just hope for the best. OAM alliance managers, through their early involvement, were trained to identify potential cultural clashes like differing approaches to decision-making, communication styles, direct versus indirect, or even expectations around hierarchy, and proactively address them.
Okay, so trying to anticipate problems.
Right. They might facilitate workshops or even act as mediators to bridge gaps in understanding. For unaligned objectives, they would ensure clear, shared key performance indicators, KPIs, and regularly scheduled strategic reviews, compelling both parties to revisit and reaffirm their common goals throughout the alliance lifecycle.
Keeping everyone on the same page constantly.
They recognized that while they couldn't do much about a molecule failing in clinical trials, they could proactively address the human and organizational elements that lead to breakdowns and ultimately failure.
That makes a lot of sense. Focus on what you can control.
And they also actively promoted alliance management as a legitimate and vital discipline, sharing their learnings and best practices through industry forums like the Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, ASAP, helping to build a wider community of practice around these crucial skills.
Right, sharing the knowledge. So to operationalize this ambitious mission of making alliances better, the OAM developed that proprietary framework called OMEPI. You mentioned it synthesized best practices from various sources, internal learnings, external consulting, industry insights into tangible tools.
Yeah, the tools were key.
It really raises an important question, though. How can you apply structured tools and processes to manage the often messy, unpredictable, and highly human reality of collaboration and interpersonal dynamics in a complex partnership?
It seems tricky.
Lilly's approach was to create practical instruments that could guide their alliance managers, offering a roadmap for navigating these challenges without stifling the necessary flexibility.
Okay, so what were some of these tools? You mentioned LN.
Right. LMP was the overall process within that.
One key tool, for example, was the three-dimensional fit analysis. This wasn't just a superficial check for strategic alignment, like do our goals match?
Went deeper than that.
Much deeper. It was a dive into assessing cultural fit. How well do our organizational cultures align? Are we collaborative or competitive? How do we make decisions? And critically, operational fit. Can our processes and systems truly integrate seamlessly?
Strategic, cultural, operational, the three dimensions.
Exactly. This comprehensive analysis was useful not only for initial assessment during the due diligence phase, allowing them to spot potential friction points before a deal is signed,
Smart. Catch problems early.
but also for ongoing monitoring throughout the alliance's life. They recognize that strategies, leadership, and even internal cultures often change over time, so regularly checking these three dimensions allowed them to proactively identify and address potential misalignments before they became major problems.
Like a regular health check for the alliance. What
Yeah.
else?
Well, another valuable tool, the Strategic Futures exercise, allowed partners to openly discuss their visions for future opportunities as well as potential problems.
Encouraging transparency, looking ahead together.
Right, fostering a truly transparent environment where both sides were compelled to think long-term and anticipate challenges rather than just react to them. But perhaps most impactful for ongoing management was the Alliance Health Survey.
The health survey, what did that involve?
It was known within Lilly as the Voice of Alliance, or VOA survey. This tool was used extensively to monitor the health of alliances on a regular basis, typically annually.
Annually.
Conducted via the web, it surveyed employees from both companies involved in the alliance across 14 key categories that had been identified as indicators for alliance success.
14 categories. Like what?
Things like trust, communication effectiveness, mutual respect, decision-making clarity, resource commitment, and problem resolution. The core elements of a working relationship.
The real nuts and bolts of collaboration.
Absolutely. And with typical response rates over 50%, it provided tangible, quantitative feedback, almost like a pulse check for the partnership.
So actual data on the soft stuff.
Exactly. This allowed alliance managers to pinpoint specific areas of strength and weakness, identify declining trends, and then take targeted corrective action. For instance, if the survey showed low scores in information sharing, the alliance manager could then implement new joint communication protocols or regular cross-functional meetings.
Making the intangible tangible
Huh.
and actionable.
Precisely. It provides concrete data for what can otherwise feel like intangible relationship dynamics, making it possible to address issues proactively rather than reactively, and crucially, proving the value of their soft efforts with hard data.
That's clever. So who actually does all this work on the ground, making these tools come to life?
Good question. Lilly conceived of 3 distinct responsibility centers for each alliance, ensuring a comprehensive, multi-layered approach.
That's easy.
Yep. First, there was the alliance champion. This was typically a very senior executive providing high-level support and oversight.
The executive sponsor, essentially.
Right. Their role was crucial for breaking bureaucratic barriers within Lilly and providing strategic direction, ensuring the alliance had executive buy-in and influence when needed. Second, you had the alliance leader.
Okay, who was that?
Usually a technical leader or a project manager from one of the core functional areas. This individual was responsible for the day-to-day operations of the alliance, holding the budget and direct line responsibility for its success.
The person actually running the project day to day.
Exactly. Finally, and this is where the OAM truly came into play, there was the alliance manager. This individual was part of the OAM and served as the business integrator between the two alliance partners.
The bridge builder from OAM.
Yes. Their unique position allowed them to see the full life cycle of the partnership, acting as a crucial central point of contact. They were also instrumental in recommending improvements back to the broader LAMP process, ensuring continuous organizational learning.
Feeding lessons back into the system.
Crucially, their position within the OAM allowed them to be perceived as a neutral party, advocating for the collaboration itself, rather than solely for Lilly's immediate interests. This objectivity was key to building trust with partners.
That neutrality perception is vital. So what did these alliance managers actually do? What were their responsibilities?
They spanned 4 critical areas, making them a truly versatile and essential role.
Okay, 4 areas. What's first?
First, they were involved in pre-deal assessment. They'd advise the deal-making team on potential risks, issues, and opportunities from an alliance management perspective, and consider the impact on existing alliances.
So providing that execution perspective early on.
Right. They also participated in due diligence, including site visits, and played an advisory role in designing robust alliance governance structures before the deal was signed.
Building it right from the start makes sense. What's second?
Second, they were key in facilitating the startup of new alliances. This demanded intensive engagement, facilitating initial alliance meetings, setting up governance structures and communication processes, orchestrating kickoff meetings,
Getting things off the ground smoothly.
and leading team-building exercises for personnel from both companies, helping diverse groups quickly coalesce into a functional team.
Breaking the ice, building rapport. Critical.
Third, they were deeply involved in supporting value creation for ongoing and transitioning alliances. This meant continuously monitoring governance and informal interactions, conducting those annual Voice of Alliance surveys, analyzing and presenting that data back to the team,
Keeping the pulse, using the VOA data.
and intervening with individuals or teams when necessary to improve alliance health or resolve nascent conflicts. They even played a catalytic role in smoothly restructuring or terminating alliances when needed, minimizing disruption.
So managing the whole life cycle, even the difficult parts like restructuring or ending things.
Exactly. And finally, their fourth key responsibility was building capability.
How so?
By funneling insights and learnings from individual alliances back into the OAM, they contributed to improving Lilly's overall alliance competence and institutional knowledge, ensuring that every alliance made the next one better.
That continuous improvement loop again. Very powerful.
Definitely. Let's look at a real-world example of these roles and tools in action, maybe starting with a research alliance.
Good idea. Let's see it play out.
Okay, the Lilly Alpha Alliance. This was a broad-based collaboration for discovery and development founded on Alpha Biotechnology Company's leadership position in gene transcription technology, specifically focused on cancer diagnostic technologies.
High-stakes area, cancer research.
Absolutely, and this was a high-stakes deal. Lilly invested significant upfront payments, specifically $100 million, part of which included a minority investment in Alpha stock.
Wow, $100 million up front.
Plus, they committed nearly $50 million in R&D payments over 5 years, and up to $75 million in milestone payments across several products. In return, Alpha also received rights to market a Lilly specialty oncology product.
So significant investment and commitment from both sides.
Definitely. 1 year after this agreement was signed, Scott Fishman, an experienced endocrinology scientist with over 24 years at Lilly in various roles, including sales, marketing, and procurement.
So a real Lilly veteran with broad experience.
Right. He was assigned as the alliance manager for the Lilly Alpha Alliance. He was instrumental in setting up the governance committees and taking committee members through team-building processes in the early stages, continuing to serve as a key point person, a true bridge between the two organizations.
Okay, so Fishman comes in as the OAM rep. But when did he really have to step up?
Well, Fishman joined when the alliance, despite its promising start and significant investment, hit a critical low point.
Trouble early on.
Yeah. Within months of its launch, a drug candidate intended for development failed in its Phase 2 clinical trials.
Oof. Phase 2 failure is a major setback.
Catastrophic, especially for a late-stage molecule. Fishman recalled that this came shortly after the alliance was operational, and given the failure, Lilly executives, under immense pressure, wanted to cut funding to the bare minimum permitted by the contract. This included funding for 40 scientists at Alpha.
Cutting funding drastically, that wouldn't go down well.
It was completely unacceptable to the Alpha team. They felt it was being done unilaterally and threatened their core research. Fishman remembered that both companies were very aggressive about wanting to control things, each trying to protect its own interests.
Tensions must have been sky high.
So tense that, as he described it, if they had a joint meeting, they would try not to make any decisions, because if you didn't make any decisions, each side could then go off and do whatever they wanted to do in the first place.
Wow, a complete breakdown in trust and communication. That highlights exactly why the alliance manager's role becomes not just important, but absolutely crucial as a neutral facilitator.
So how did Fishman navigate that kind of deep-seated conflict?
He had to play a critical, almost diplomatic role, facilitating negotiations during this crisis, getting the different functions, scientists, executives talking again.
Trying to rebuild bridges.
Exactly. And then helping the teams find mutually acceptable solutions. He was critically involved when the alliance reevaluated the workflow distribution. Initially, they had this model where every aspect of the project was handled by a Lilly scientist and an Alpha scientist doing everything together.
Sounds collaborative, but maybe inefficient.
Highly inefficient.
So?
While well-intentioned, it was actually creating bottlenecks everywhere. Slow decision-making, redundant efforts, a lack of clear ownership. Fishman helped them pivot from this doing everything together approach to a more efficient model that leveraged each team's specific complementary strengths.
What were the strengths?
Alpha was strong in biology, and Lilly was strong in chemistry. This strategic shift in workflow was vital. As Fishman observes, when we did that, all of a sudden we started to have clinical candidates and we now have more drugs in the clinic.
So, focusing on strengths turned things around.
It allowed them to move beyond a restrictive contractual obligation to a truly efficient, synergistic, and productive collaborative process, which ultimately saved the alliance.
And Fishman's impact wasn't just internal to Lilly, right? It was felt by the partner firm, too.
Profoundly felt and appreciated. He was perceived by Alpha as a truly neutral person, which speaks volumes about his effectiveness and his ability to transcend internal loyalties for the good of the partnership.
That's high praise from a partner.
It is. A senior Alpha scientist praised Fishman as a voice of reason and process who balanced different styles, saying, Scott is the kind of person who I could call up and say, look, we've got a situation. We need to talk through this and see how we're going to sort this out. In any alliance, you got to have someone who is diplomatic and uses really good judgment.
So he became that trusted intermediary.
Exactly. It highlights the immense value of an objective, third-party facilitator, even when that person is employed by one of the partners. It's about building trust, fostering open communication, and creating a safe channel for honest, problem-solving dialogue that goes beyond simply enforcing the contract.
It's that going beyond the contract that really makes the difference, isn't it? By 2004, this alliance had not only recovered but had identified several promising drug candidates, significantly advancing Lilly's understanding of gene technology.
And Alpha benefited too, financially and with future royalty prospects.
Right. Fishman himself noted a key distinction that made the collaboration truly successful. There's the contractual governance, which is what you can read in the contract, but what really brought the collaboration to life was the non-contractual governance.
Non-contractual governance. What does he mean by that?
It was those small extra things. It was adding scorecards for tracking joint progress. It was establishing additional informal venues for research discussions that weren't mandated by the contract. And it was creating more frequent opportunities for coordination of activities that went beyond the formal committee meetings.
Ah, the informal structures, the relationship building.
This shows the profound power of going beyond the legal document, actively investing in the relationship and cultivating informal structures that genuinely enhance true collaboration and shared ownership. It's about building a partnership culture, not just executing a legal agreement.
Yeah, that makes a huge difference. But despite these compelling successes and the clear value demonstrated by individuals like Fishman, there were still some lingering questions and skepticism within Lilly, weren't there?
Yes, that's true. Some executives, particularly those focused maybe more on immediate financial metrics, questioned the OAM's emphasis on alliance health.
What was their concern?
One senior executive candidly commented, "They emphasize so much the health of the alliance. What does it benefit to have a healthy alliance that does not pay back to the company? The bottom line is equally important."
Ah, the classic tension. Relationship versus results.
It highlights a persistent and understandable challenge for alliance functions, proving their value tangibly, beyond just harmonious relationships or good communication.
Right. It underscores the ongoing need for these functions to connect their efforts directly to measurable business outcomes and financial returns, demonstrating that healthy alliances are, in fact, the most profitable and strategically impactful ones. It's a constant balancing act.
Definitely. Okay, let's pivot now to a different type of alliance that presents its own unique set of challenges. A marketing alliance.
Marketing alliances. Different dynamics again.
This particular case involved a partnership between Lilly and Beta Pharmaceuticals, a major Japanese pharmaceutical company. Beta wanted to establish a significant U.S. presence for its novel diabetes drug, a truly innovative product.
So Beta needed market access in the U.S.
Exactly. Simultaneously, Lilly at the time needed an oral diabetes product to complete its portfolio, but had no immediate product in that segment. It was a clear, almost perfect strategic fit.
A nice synergy on paper.
They signed a co-promotion agreement, a first of its kind for Lilly to share costs and revenues for 7 years, crucially with no upfront funding. As part of the agreement, Beta's new U.S. company would also co-promote one of Lilly's products until Beta's new diabetes product was approved for U.S. marketing by the FDA.
Interesting structure. co-promotion, shared costs, no upfront cash.
Michael Ransom, an organic chemist by training and a sales manager with over 23 years in the healthcare industry, became the alliance manager for this complex and pioneering project.
So Ransom from OAM steps in. Was he involved early on?
Deeply involved, even before the deal was formally signed. For several weeks in August and September of 1998, he practically lived with 3 Japanese colleagues who were renting a temporary office space in Chicago, trying to work out the minute operational details of the partnership.
Wow, embedded right from the start. What was he doing?
His job during that intense period was to meticulously put together the basic framework for how they were going to set up their communication network, organize their marketing groups, sales groups, and medical groups. He described it as orchestrating all the things needed to get the partnership off the ground, from IT infrastructure to defining roles.
Laying the operational foundation. Critical but tough work.
Very. Despite rapid drug approval and launch within 9 months of signing, operationalizing the alliance quickly hit significant snags.
So the strategic fit was clear, but execution was tricky.
Exactly. While the strategic fit was obvious, there were real difficulties in day-to-day execution. For example, Beta was intently focused on building its long-term organization in the U.S., prioritizing strategic investments for future growth.
Thinking long-term? Building infrastructure.
While Lilly's team focused on maximizing immediate sales, driven by tactical approaches to raise immediate revenue prospects and hit quarterly targets.
Classic conflict. Long-term build versus short-term sales focus.
This fundamental difference in time horizons and operational priorities created significant conflicts, especially around shared expenses and resource allocation, requiring multiple contract revisions to get things back on track and realign their efforts.
So even with clear strategic alignment, operational alignment, and differing organizational objectives at the execution level can be a formidable hurdle. It really needed that bridge builder.
And Ransom's crucial role in bridging these very real operational and cultural differences was widely recognized. A senior Beta executive praised Ransom for providing one-stop shopping, meaning he was the go-to person for virtually any issue.
The single point of contact. Very valuable.
And, more importantly, for his profound objectivity. This executive noted, and I think this is key, he's certainly a Lilly employee, but comes across as what's best for the alliance and not necessarily what's best for Lilly or for Beta.
That neutrality perception again, even coming from a partner executive.
He's provided continuity. This continuity was particularly critical as Beta saw 3 major leadership changes on their side during the alliance, making Ransom the consistent link, the anchor point.
Wow, 3 leadership changes at the partner. Ransom must have been vital.
He also helped them effectively leverage the Voice of Alliance survey for tangible feedback, which helped both sides understand how they were doing and where to focus for improvement. This unique ability to maintain an objective, alliance-centric view, even while representing one partner, was absolutely critical to the collaboration's endurance and eventual success.
It really spoke volumes about the OEM's ability to cultivate true partnership. But while Ransom's contributions were largely lauded, it's also worth noting that not everyone on the alliance team agreed on the specific contribution of the alliance manager, particularly in day-to-day operations, right?
That's true. There was some pushback. One executive commented that people on line management were responsible for the daily grind, and an alliance manager often came in without a sense of the cadence of operations and might not be able to represent either side effectively in the moment.
Right, that inherent tension between strategic oversight from OAM and the tactical execution on the ground.
It exists. However, the results truly speak for themselves in this case. Starting with no independent office in 1998, Beta's U.S. operations had grown to over 1,800 employees by 2004.
1,800 employees from scratch.
And the drug sales reached nearly $2 billion, representing a staggering 52% of the U.S. market in its category, far exceeding initial expectations.
$2 billion in sales. That's a massive success.
It provided a much-needed boost for Lilly's marketing resources at a time when it was recovering from the loss of its lucrative Prozac patent. The alliance was so successful it was expanded globally in 1999 to cover over 70 countries.
Went global.
And in 2003, a co-development agreement was initiated, deepening the partnership. This case demonstrates how dedication to relationship building, combined with a clear long-term vision, can overcome operational friction and lead to world-class partnerships and significant market success.
It really proves that the soft side of alliance management indeed drives hard results, even if some operational folks felt disconnected sometimes. The outcome was undeniable.
Absolutely. Okay, finally, let's turn to manufacturing alliances, which, as you might expect, have their own distinct characteristics and pressures.
Manufacturing. Different timelines, different regulations.
Our third case study involves Lilly's long-standing partnership with Gamma Manufacturing, an employee-owned company. Gamma had been a supplier to Lilly for over 20 years, specializing in critical plastic parts for complex drug delivery systems like those insulin pens we mentioned.
20 years as a supplier, so a long history there already.
Right. Their relationship deepened significantly in 2000 when it was formalized into a strategic alliance encompassing multiple product development projects. By 2004, there were 7 active projects underway within this alliance, including one located in France, indicating its growing scope and importance.
7 projects under one alliance umbrella.
Dave Haas, a seasoned manager in Lilly's Pharmaceutical Delivery Systems, PDS Group, with over 20 years of experience at Lilly in dealing with vendor relationship management, was appointed as the alliance manager.
So Huss, another experienced hand from OAM. What pressures did this alliance face? You said they were different.
Very different compared to R&D or marketing. They operated under extremely tight timelines, as short as 18 to 24 months from concept to launch.
18 months compared to 8+ years for a drug?
Wow.
Immense pressure to get cutting-edge products to market quickly. They also had to navigate stringent Food and Drug Administration, FDA regulations, ensuring every plastic part met rigorous quality and safety standards.
No room for error in medical devices. None. And they had to operate in a highly competitive, fast-evolving market where convenience and advanced features like state-of-the-art electronics and delivery systems were key differentiators.
So speed, quality, innovation, all critical.
What's particularly interesting here is that the PDS group at Lilly, where Haas worked, was unique. It was already heavily leveraged through alliances, embodying a culture that inherently valued and relied on external partners for manufacturing expertise.
Oh, so PDS was already alliance-friendly.
Exactly. Unlike other manufacturing groups at Lilly that might have been more internally focused, PDS already had a strong culture that valued partners. This meant that the adoption of OAM practices and the role of an alliance manager like Haas was more organic and readily embraced, building on existing good practices rather than starting from scratch culturally.
That existing culture must have made a big difference. So how did Haas fit into this, especially with, over 100 manufacturing alliances identified by OAM across Lilly?
His role was to provide a central point of contact and ensure coordination across the multitude of projects with Gamma. While each specific project had its own day-to-day manager, Haas established a high-level steering committee for overall oversight.
The big picture view.
And ensured broad goals, metrics, and review frameworks were clearly agreed upon between Lilly and Gamma. He wasn't involved in the microscopic day-to-day specifics like negotiating resin costs or resolving every minor contractual issue.
Not down in the weeds necessarily.
Right. But he was the critical person who pulls people together, makes sure that he gets involved when there is something like this that can be challenging for the relationship.
The relationship guardian, the coordinator.
He was consistently seen by Gamma as their champion within Lilly, someone who genuinely understood their perspective, could advocate for their needs, and quickly facilitate resolution when inevitable challenges arose.
Their champion inside Lilly. That's powerful for a partner to feel. But did Gamma find Lilly easy to work with overall? Sometimes large companies can be bureaucratic.
Well, despite some Gamma executives feeling that Lilly's larger system could sometimes be rigid and potentially hinder quick action, a common challenge when dealing with a large pharmaceutical firm, they strongly believed that Haas and the OAM had fostered an environment of openness.
Openness was key.
This allowed issues to be discussed transparently and resolved quickly, preventing them from festering into larger problems. This case highlights a crucial point. Alliance management isn't just for the high-profile R&D or sales partnerships. It's absolutely crucial across the entire value chain, from discovery to manufacturing and commercialization.
Right, from lab bench to patient delivery.
And its implementation can and should adapt to different functional cultures and existing practices. For PDS, the OAM structure wasn't forced, but rather built upon an existing culture of valuing partners, showing that effective alliance management can be integrated into diverse parts of a large organization.
So what does all this mean for you, the listener? It means formalizing alliance management with dedicated roles and tools like those developed by Lilly can significantly improve outcomes across diverse partnership types, from complex research and marketing collaborations to critical manufacturing agreements, making every external relationship more productive.
Absolutely. By the end of 2004, Lilly's OAM had matured significantly. It grew into an organization of 15 experienced, dedicated alliance managers overseeing over 200 strategic alliances across the globe.
15 managers for over 200 alliances. That's a significant operation.
And more than 1,500 Lilly employees had been trained in the art and science of alliance management, indicating a deep company-wide commitment to building this capability, not just centralizing it.
Spreading the skills throughout the organization.
Lilly had truly transformed from what was once described as a marginal player in alliance practice to a recognized industry leader. They won the prestigious Association of Strategic Alliance Professionals, ASA Quality Award in 2003.
The ASAP award is a big deal in this field.
And were identified as a top-ranked partner by PwC and Forbes in 2004. An independent survey by IBM's consulting group even judged Lilly to be #1 in partnering capability within the entire pharma biotech community.
#1. Quite a turnaround.
This is where it gets really interesting, though, because even at the pinnacle of industry leadership, new challenges and strategic questions inevitably arise, pushing the boundaries of what's next.
Right. Success breeds new challenges. Despite this remarkable success and leadership position, senior management at Lilly faced 3 critical issues for OAM's future strategy as they looked ahead.
Not small operational tweaks, you mean?
No, these were fundamental questions about the direction, scope, and evolution of their hard-earned alliance capabilities.
Okay, what was the first pressing issue?
The first was the urgent need for an expanding alliance scope, both geographically and functionally. Lilly's rapidly growing international presence meant alliances were expanding globally and across the entire value chain, research, manufacturing, commercial functions, often simultaneously, within a single partnership.
Getting much more complex.
Exactly. For instance, they had recently entered into significant alliances with major international players, like Sankyo, the #2 Japanese pharmaceutical company, and Boehringer Ingelheim from Germany. Both of these deals required collaboration across multiple geographies and diverse functional areas, adding layers of complexity that far exceeded their domestic function-specific partnerships.
So, managing across cultures, across functions, across borders.
Precisely. This expansion immediately raised important and complex questions about the specific intercultural skills needed for international alliances. For example, how do you effectively manage communication when one partner values direct, explicit feedback, while another prefers more indirect, harmonious approaches?
Yeah, cultural clash is waiting to happen, if not managed.
Or how do you navigate decision-making processes that might be centralized in one culture but highly decentralized in another? Furthermore, there were significant concerns about how to operate effectively in countries without strong intellectual property, IP regimes, where the legal frameworks for protecting innovation might be less robust, introducing new forms of risk.
Operating in different legal environments as risk.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about managing increasingly global complexity, where cultural nuances, differing legal environments, and varied business practices add significant layers of challenge to partnership success.
And it wasn't just global complexity, was it? There were internal overlaps, too.
Right. On another front, the rise of dedicated clinical research organizations, CROs, in countries like India and China was raising the possibility of enhanced offshoring of some research services, particularly for preclinical trials. This blurred lines with procurement's existing supplier relationship model.
So OAM versus procurement. Who manages what?
Exactly. It led to questions about how procurement could take advantage of OAM's sophisticated tools and processes, and what role each function should play in managing relationships traditionally negotiated by procurement. And on top of that, overseas subsidiaries like Lilly Japan, which had over 30 local alliances, were forging their own local partnerships.
So local affiliates doing their own thing, too.
This brings up a vital strategic question. How does OAM effectively disseminate its expert knowledge, its tools, its best practices to these affiliates, and how do they maintain a consistent, high-quality approach across the global enterprise without overly centralizing everything and stifling valuable local initiative and responsiveness? It's a delicate balance.
It's a really tricky balance. Okay, that was the first issue, expanding scope. What was the second strategic issue?
The second revolved around OAM's primary focus. Should it continue to emphasize relationship management or shift more towards operations management, or perhaps prioritize capability building across the organization?
Relationship, operations, or capability, the focus question.
OAM had been very successful in creating a strong alliance-oriented culture at the functional level within Lilly, moving the company away from that transaction-driven era.
Just getting the deal done.
which largely emphasized writing good contracts, to a relational era, which emphasized alliance health and invested significant time and attention on managing the ongoing relationships.
Hmm.
However, as we heard earlier, some within Lilly were skeptical of this strong emphasis on alliance health.
Right, the soft stuff concern again.
They viewed the relationship role as potentially soft and perhaps less directly value-added compared to operations management, which focused on resolving specific issues and was seen as more project management-oriented, directly impacting tangible deliverables and timelines. There was a desire to see more concrete, immediate returns from OEM's efforts.
So more focus on fixing problems and driving results, less on just maintaining harmony.
That was the tension.
It's true that alliance managers, in truth, clearly operated on a continuum, right? Balancing both the relationship side, building trust, ensuring communication, and the operations side, troubleshooting, driving progress, depending on the day, the alliance, the specific needs.
They had to do both, of course.
But the growing awareness within Lilly was a desire to shift even further towards what was termed a capability focus, making organizational learning a central issue for alliance management.
Capability focus.
Yeah.
Meaning what exactly?
This suggested moving beyond simply achieving immediate milestones within a single alliance to strategically enhancing Lilly's overall organizational capabilities across the board. This included creating a crucial feedback loop,
That learning loop again.
actively funneling implementation insights and lessons learned from the execution phase of alliances back into the negotiation stage so that future deals could be better structured, better governed, and better managed from the outset. This cross-pollination between planning and implementation was identified as a key area for improvement to avoid repeating past mistakes and to continuously refine their deal-making approach.
So using today's alliances to make tomorrow's alliances smarter from the start.
Exactly. So this really raises an important question for you and your own organization. Are you just focused on getting the deal done and managing the immediate outcomes? Or are you actively learning from your partnerships to build a stronger organizational muscle and a deeper well of expertise for future collaborations? It's about long-term strategic advantage.
A critical question. And that brings us to the third and final pressing concern, which was absolutely critical for the long term. Staffing OEM for the future, and more broadly, developing the talent needed for alliance management across the entire organization.
Finding the right people, always a challenge.
It was becoming abundantly clear that successful alliance managers needed a very diverse, almost paradoxical skill set, akin to that of a general manager who can wear many hats.
What kind of skills?
They required deep cross-functional knowledge understanding R&D, manufacturing, marketing, legal. They needed prior operational experience, so they understood the realities of day-to-day execution. Crucially, strong interpersonal skills to navigate complex relationships, both internally and externally.
The people skills.
Excellent problem-solving abilities were a must, as they were often mediators. Active listening skills were paramount to truly understand partner needs and concerns, even when unspoken. And finally, they needed to be very good at participatory leadership, fostering collaboration rather than dictating.
Wow, that's a demanding profile. Almost a unicorn.
It really is. This was a significant challenge for HR. How do you identify, attract, train, and then provide an attractive career path for such crucial, multifaceted roles within the company, especially when these skills are so much in demand?
Yeah, where do these people go next in their careers?
And in a related matter, there was increasing concern that many of the high-level OEM skills, the black box knowledge, needed to be diffused more broadly to the actual alliance leaders who were directly involved in the day-to-day management of specific alliances in the business units.
Spreading the expertise beyond just the OEM team.
Right. This meant strengthening the overall human resource dimension of alliance practice, making alliance management a core competency throughout Lilly, not just within the OEM itself.
Integrating it fully into the company fabric.
Gary Statch, who was the executive director of OAM back in 2004, perfectly summed up this continuous journey and the ongoing challenge. He said, "We need to help Lilly to become more flexible and easier to work with for our partners so that we can extract the highest value from these alliances."
Flexibility, ease of doing business, key for partnerships.
We have been successful in helping the alliances anticipate issues and mitigate them. We need to be even more proactive. As we get more opportunities to learn from these alliances, we also have to figure out how to enhance our shared learning capability.
Proactive learning, shared capability.
Of course, he added, we should be careful not to lose the basics of alliance management, those tools, processes, and people that earned us the favorable reputation that we have.
Don't forget what got you here.
Exactly. This truly captures the essence of continuous improvement and the ongoing evolution in a critical strategic area, even when you're already at the highest levels of performance.
So, what does all of this mean for you, whether you're leading a team, managing a project, or even just navigating cross-functional collaborations? Lilly's extraordinary journey shows that mastering strategic alliances isn't just about the initial act of signing contracts.
It's so much more than the deal.
It's about building a dedicated organizational capability, deeply fostering strong relationships built on trust, leveraging precise tools like the Voice of Alliance survey for continuous feedback, and crucially, continuously learning and adapting.
It's about being proactive, managing far beyond the cold, hard contract.
And diligently cultivating those non-contractual governance elements, the shared scorecards, the informal additional discussions, the seamless coordination that truly bring partnerships to life and unlock their full transformative potential.
This really raises an important introspective question, doesn't it? In your own professional life, where are you currently relying on external partnerships, whether they're with suppliers, distributors, technology providers, or even internal cross-departmental collaborations?
How are you managing them?
Are you treating them as mere transactions, focusing only on the legal terms and immediate deliverables and then moving on? Or are you actively investing in the deeper relationship building and robust operational frameworks, the kind we saw Lilly develop?
The kind that could transform them.
Exactly. Transform them into a source of enduring competitive advantage, a wellspring of innovation, and a powerful engine for organizational learning. How much more value could you be creating? How many more breakthroughs could you achieve by truly making your alliances not just functional, but demonstrably better?
A powerful question to reflect on. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about and hopefully some actionable insights to apply in your own work. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for listening.
See you later. Bye-bye.